So I want to welcome you all to Brookings, and I'm glad you're going to spend a little time learning about the budget. So before you start playing the game, we want to talk a little bit about the context to think about as you play the game, why we decided to do the game. So if we think about what's happened in the federal budget and sort of just have an idea, the federal government has been about 20% of the economy, pretty much for, very stable for quite a long time. This graph starting in 1967, you can see it's about 20%. The green line is the revenues, that's all the taxes it takes in. And the blue line is outlays, and that's spending. And this is all done as a share of GDP. What's GDP? GDP is kind of the total output of the economy. It tells you something about the size of the economy. So it makes sense, especially when you're looking at things over a long period of time, to kind of scale by GDP, right? As the economy gets bigger and there are more people and wages are higher, it makes sense for the government to spend more. And so this shows that basically the government revenues and spending grows along with GDP. So one of the reasons we decided to do this game is because a lot of people kind of have the wrong idea of what the government actually does. So if I said, what does the government spend money on? Like, what are the big ticket items? Anybody suggest something? Yeah, over there. Entitlement programs, which are? And? Good, Social Security, Medicare, great. So those are big ones. Anything else? Yeah, back there. Defense spending, okay. Infrastructure, possibly. What else? Anything else? Education, okay. So let's look at what the federal government actually spends money on. Everything we're talking about today is the federal government. So there's two layers of government, or there's many, but there's federal, we usually think about them federal, and then state and local, right? So education spending is a very big ticket item for state and local governments. In fact, most of K through 12, right, education, elementary through high school, is done by local governments, kind of supplemented by states. The federal government spends some. But as we said, the big ticket items, Social Security, 25%, health programs, that's Medicare, Medicaid, the subsidies for the exchanges for part of Obamacare, that's another 31%. So that's over half of federal spending already on those programs, so that's great. Defense is also very big, that's the yellow, so 16% of the budget goes to defense. And then when I said, yeah, infrastructure, kind of everything else is in that 17%, everything that's discretionary, right? So that's infrastructure, that's money to pay government workers at the IRS and the Department of Agriculture, and everything else you think that the government does falls into that 17%. So some of that is like highway spending, but a lot, it's not a huge part of it. If you would say, oh, how much is infrastructure? It's not going to be huge. As I said, we've been about 20% of the economy, goes up, goes down, depends on legislation, it depends on the state of the economy. Spending goes up in recessions, it goes down when you're not in a recession usually. But going forward, we have a challenge, and the challenge comes from population aging, okay? Now, what you see is this is starting in 1950, it's the ratio of people 65 years and older to the population 20 to 64, kind of the working age population. And that kind of gives you an idea of sort of the burden. So we kind of get tax revenues from wages, that's mostly 20 to 64, and then so much of that spending is on entitlements, which is going to people 65 and older, and so this tells you something about the budgetary challenges. So you can see that right now, in 2017, you see it was kind of increasing slowly for a long time, and then it went on this big, sharp increase between 2010 and about 2030, okay? We're kind of a third of the way through that right now, and then it starts increasing a little bit over time. Does anybody know why this ratio of elderly to working age population is going through such a big increase right now? Yeah. Yeah, so it's the retirement of the baby boom generation. Now, so if the baby boomer generations are going to retire, does that mean this thing is going to come back down again once they're all retired? No, why not? Well, so exactly. So what happened was the baby boom generation was the product of that people had about 3 kids per family, right? And so there are a lot of them. But after that, they didn't keep on having 3 kids. The fertility rate, the number of children that people have, went from 3 to closer to 2. So when you think about how many kids people have, the more kids you have, then the smaller this ratio of elderly to working age population, the smaller the ratio of parents to kids. So when you have fewer kids, that boosts this up. So we're not expecting this thing to come back down because no one's thinking we're going back to 3 kids. Now, maybe in 50, 60 years, we really have no idea about how many kids people are going to have eventually, but we know how many kids they've had now, so we can do a pretty good forecast over the next 20, 30 years, okay? The other thing that pushes it up, and that sort of was, you could see it happening before the retirement of the baby boom, it continues to creep up after. What else besides changes in fertility do you think is pushing up the ratio of elderly to working age population over time? Yeah? What? Longer life expectancies, exactly. So that's the other thing that's sort of like over time, we think that thing should keep sort of going up, right? So those are the 2 factors that are pushing up this ratio of elderly to working age population. Now, on top of this issue, we have this other problem that's it's not new, but that health spending tends to increase faster than GDP, right? So that spending on health so if the GDP increases 2%, then health spending tends to go up 3 or 4%, right? That kind of wanes. There are times like recently it's kind of slowed, but that's a very long-standing trend. Why do you think that would be? Why do you think health spending goes up faster than GDP? Well, you kind of mentioned it. You said health spending when you talked about life expectancy, right? So part of it is improvements in technology that say we can do more stuff with the health system than we used to be able to, and we really want to, right? So part of it's a good thing. It says like there's a lot of things that we can do, and we can keep people alive longer, we can cure cancers, and we can, other people might argue it's inefficiencies and that we do too much, and that's probably true as well. So there's going to be arguments about whether or not it's all a good thing or a bad thing, but it is definitely a budgetary challenge, right? Because the government, through Medicare, pays for the health spending of the elderly, the more that we can do, the more we want to do, the more expensive it becomes. So when you combine population aging with rapid spending on health, that really creates a big problem from a budget perspective. Okay, so if we look at current projections, so let me tell you something. All the projections that I'm going to show you and that I've shown you and that are in the game, the baseline projections, come from the Congressional Budget Office, CBO, and what they do is they say, we're going to say what is going to happen to spending and taxes if the laws remain the same, okay? So it's going to show you the need for changes in laws. It's going to say, if you don't change anything, this is what you have, so maybe you should do something. So under current law, this is a projection of what's going to happen between 2016 and 2046 in 30 years. And you can look at that pie chart, and you can see Social Security and health went from 25 and 31 to 28% of the economy and 40%. So you can see they're big ticket items now, but they're projected to be even a bigger part of spending going forward, okay? So that creates part of the challenges. That's kind of looking at shares of spending, okay? If you look just at spending as a share of GDP, you can see what CBO is assuming when they say, here's what I'm assuming about the long run, what's going to be different. So you can see that they're expecting actually other spending, things like infrastructure, are going to go down as a share of the economy. Net interest, so if we borrow money over time and we have to pay interest, that's going to go up. Social Security goes up. Healthcare programs go up. They actually assume that taxes, even under the baseline, even if you don't change anything, taxes are going to go up a little bit over time because of the way the tax system is set up. And deficits are going to go up. So that says we're going to spend a lot more on Medicare and Social Security. Some things are going down, taxes are going up, but not enough. We're going to have to borrow more, right? What is the deficit? It's how much we have to borrow because we're not raising the revenues for it, okay? So they're going to say we're going to have much larger deficits as a share of GDP. We're going to hit over 8% of GDP if we don't change the laws in 2046. And that's coming from what I talked about, the health spending and the aging of the population combined, okay? So how do we look at that? So that is going to increase. So the deficits are the amount that you, every year, that you sort of have to borrow. What's the debt? Difference between deficits and debt. Anybody? It's kind of how much do I owe? Like if I borrow every month on my credit card, and then my credit card statement keeps going up and going up. And again, remember, this is a share of the economy, because as the economy grows, it's not a bad thing if your debt grows with it. But this says that the debt's growing much, much faster. You can see that in right now, it's, with that line projected, our debt to GDP ratio is about 77%. it's already higher than we've ever seen since wartime, right? So we're already starting pretty high. And then it's projected to just keep on increasing, right? And you can imagine what that line would look like if you kept on going up. You can see it's kind of exploding. So this is another way of saying we have a fiscal problem, right? That we have to do something because we can't keep borrowing and borrowing more forever, okay? So what does it mean? What do we have to do, okay? Now, these are all projections. Of course, we don't really know. We don't know what's going to happen to the economy. We don't know what's going to happen to immigration. We don't know what's going to happen to productivity and how much people are earning. There's a lot of unknowns. But the demographics are pretty clear. We do know those. So we're not really sure of the precise magnitude of the numbers, but it's pretty clear we're going to have to do something, right? That's almost unescapable. What does that mean? We're going to have to lower those deficits. We're going to have to borrow less than we think we're going to have to borrow, which either means more revenues, right? We either have to take in more or less spending, or spend less, okay? Now, when we did this game, the game is going to be, here you are, you're in the driver's seat, and you're going to have to figure out how to get that debt into a sustainable level, okay? So fix the problem. So how should we say, what's the correct goal? How high should the debt to GDP ratio be? That's not something an economist can say, oh, it should be 68%, right? It's kind of unclear. You know, if we have higher debt, it means that more of the budget has to go to paying interest on the debt, right? It also means that like right now, interest rates are pretty low. And so it doesn't seem like a huge deal that we have this debt. But if something happened in the world economy that made interest rates go up a lot, then all of a sudden, we'd have to be borrowing much, much more or cutting back spending much faster than we thought. So it kind of makes us vulnerable, right? If you have a big debt, then you kind of care a lot about interest rates, right? But on the other hand, it's not a bad thing for the government to be borrowing, especially because if you think of what it spends money on. A lot of things it spends money on are things like an investment. There's nothing wrong with borrowing to buy a house, right? Because you're going to sort of spend, you get benefits from it over a long time, so it's okay to pay for it over a long time. If you're thinking about infrastructure or education or health care for kids, there's a lot of things that we think that you spend money now, you'll actually get returns from it, so it makes sense to have borrowing. So its debt should not be zero. Exactly how high is something that people can argue about, and we're not really sure. But we are sure that you can't keep borrowing forever. Right? At some point, you know, if you took that line up, you know, you'd spend all of GDP on paying back the debt. Obviously, you can't do that, right? And at some point, if you owe so much, people are going to say, "I don't believe you're going to lend to me anymore," and people will stop lending, and interest rates will really go high. So we know that we have to do something. Okay. So what did we do? We said, well, one thing that seems kind of reasonable is we know the debt's pretty high today, but it seems pretty sustainable. Everybody's very willing to lend to us. No one's worrying about the credibility from an economic perspective of the debt. So in the game, what you have to do is to figure out that by the end of the forecast period in 25 years, that debt to GDP ratio, which I showed going up to like 130%, has to be no higher than it is today. Has to be 77%. That's your mission. Okay. Okay. So we made a game. As I think I've talked about all of these things, one of the things that we want to have you people who play the game really think about is that I give you all these numbers. How high should the debt should be? The debt should be, you know, no higher than 77%. But that government does stuff that you care about. Right? That it's not just a matter of kind of balancing numbers without thinking carefully at how are you doing it. You don't want to just necessarily take a sledgehammer. And in fact, what you want for the government has to reflect your values, right? And so when you play the game, as you'll see, you get to choose, well, at first we're going to assign them, and then we'll play after where you choose them. But you sort of say, well, what is it that I think are my most important priorities? And can I get that debt to GDP ratio back down to 77% while maintaining my priorities? And how hard is it? And kind of what are the trade-offs? So we want you to sort of start with remembering that government does things that you care about. And you should think about that as you're trying to figure out how the math works, right? And the other thing is you guys were great. When I asked what the government spent money on, you were perfectly right. But that's not the general public. So here's a poll from what contributes a great deal to the national debt. Okay, number one, foreign aid. Okay, on the realities over here, if you look at what foreign aid is, it's teeny, right? But there are a lot of people think, oh, those people in Washington don't know what they're doing. If they would just stop spending money on other countries, you know, we wouldn't have a problem. All right, so defense is high, The ACA actually, when it was passed, did not increase the debt at all. It went to be budget neutral, but people think, oh, that's a huge thing. And so one of the reasons we wanted to play the game is for people to say, okay, you think it's so easy to solve it by getting rid of these things you don't care about, go try, right? And to figure out really what it is that you do have to change in order to get the debt back to a sustainable level.